The tool that I'm going to show you today is VoiceThread. It is an online platform that you can use and incorporate into your modules to increase student-to-student engagement or student-to-instructor engagement. It's also a great community building tool. Students can work together to insert information into VoiceThread. They can record presentations or post their research. So there's lots of things. You can actually do assessments with VoiceThread. So I'm on voicethread.com and I'm under what is the products, the higher ed page. And if you scroll down, it tells you there's actually two options for VoiceThread accounts. It's not free, unfortunately, and it's not, this college does not have a site license. So if you want to use VoiceThread, at least at this point in time, you need to purchase a single instructor license. It is $99, but you can use it for the whole year, as many VoiceThreads as you want, and as many courses as you want. To me, it's certainly worth the money. I use it every semester, probably 8 to 10 VoiceThreads in every one of my courses. So before, if you don't want to do the purchase right away, you can sign up for just a free account. And I think the free account allows you to make 2 or 3 VoiceThreads for free before you have to pay to make any more. So if you wanted to try it, you could certainly do that. So you would just click register here, and then well, I'm already signed in. So you would click register here, and then fill out your information, and then register, and then you'd be able to use VoiceThread. I actually have a paid account, so I will sign in with my email. It pops up, sign in. It's very quick. With the paid account for the instructor, it includes something like 50 student accounts, but we don't need those. My students don't make their own VoiceThreads. I always make the VoiceThreads, and they kind of fill in the blanks, if you will, or they post and they add materials to it, or they comment on VoiceThreads that I've already created. And even if they did need to make a VoiceThread, they certainly would only make one, maybe a whole semester, so they could do it with the free account if they wanted to. So in order to make a VoiceThread, you would select Create. And then what it does, it allows you to either import like audio files, videos, PDFs, images, PowerPoint presentations, Google Slide presentations, basically anything that's on your computer you can import. You can also import media, and it just gives you some standard ones that are already here that you can import if you're looking for, just some standard images or something like that. You can record audio right here, an audio presentation. You can take a webcam photo. You can do a webcam video. If a student wanted to make a presentation, or you wanted to kind of like a lecture, you could just record yourself. And you can also insert URLs. And sometimes what you might want to do is insert maybe like an image, a document, and then maybe on that document you want to put a website so that they look at the image, they read the document, and they go to a website, and they study some materials, and they come back, and then they would comment. So I've already made a sample VoiceThread that I'm going to open up here. And once it's open, in order to comment on it, you click the little plus sign down here, and then students can comment. Now, there are some options for playback where you can allow them to do text posts or upload files. For this particular one, I just said you can call in your comment, you can audio record your comment, or you can video record your comment. These are the only modes that I let my students do because I think it works better at building a community, because they actually get to see people and hear people like you would in a regular classroom. But that's certainly your choice how you want to do that. And then there's some other playback options that you can do when you create your video, as far as limiting how long the post can be. Or if you're going to do an assessment, then you might want to moderate the post where students can't see other students post. They can only post their own. So this is a sample. So if I wanted to, for example, record a comment on this, I could just click on it, and I'm saying like, welcome to my VoiceThread. This is a sample VoiceThread that I created for a summer program. And then if I wanted to, say I wanted to draw my students' attention to something, you click this little pencil down here, and you can select whatever color you want, and say if I wanted to say, be sure and read this, or what kind of art or drawing was used to make this image or whatever, or make sure you read, this. These lines will fade, but what you can do is you can click this and then they won't fade anymore. So it's up to you how you want to do it. All right, so let's stop the recording, and then it's going to process. It's usually very quick. And then once it's processed, it'll start playing back what I said. So I'm going to save it. And then once it's there, there's my post. And if I want to, I can ask it to close caption it. And it does take maybe like 30 minutes. It depends for the closed caption to go through. Now, as a student, I could do a couple of things. I could go down here and I could create my own post. And that's generally what I do. I have students, okay, read the instructions or listen to the instructions. And generally when I make the first post and I give audio instructions and video instructions. And sometimes I give text instructions too, just so they can look at it, kind of follow along. And then they would go down here and they would make their own post. And then I asked them, they actually have to reply to somebody else or engage with someone else. So if somebody wanted to reply to my post, they could just click the little reply button here and they would be able to reply directly to me. So that's the basics of VoiceThread. Now I want to show you a couple examples of what I've done. So this one is a VoiceThread that I make, and I generally use this just about every semester. And it's just an introduction that I do for all my classes because I teach history. I ask students to tell me, and like I have a video for the instructions, I have audio instructions, and I have text instructions. And that's certainly up to you if you want to do that. Video is closed caption, so I mean you should be okay, but if you want to just make sure that if they're detailed that you go ahead and do that. So for this one, I always ask my students to give me your history. What do you know about your family? Where are you from? What do you know about your mother's side, your father's side, your grandparents? Where did you grow up? And what's interesting is this simple activity, really, the students really get into it, and they will use the pencil and they'll say, okay, like I was born in Russia, but we moved to New York, and they mentioned moved to California. Oftentimes I'll have students will say I'm from a certain village in Mexico, and it's pretty amazing how often students will say, oh, I grew up in the same, within 50 miles of that town in Russia, or I grew up, my mother grew up in, just this last semester, somebody said their mother grew up in Mexico, and they were talking about the last name, and that was the same student's last name. Turned out they were actually related, which is pretty interesting. So that's just a simple activity. It gets students to engage and see each other. They get to see the picture, they get to hear the voice, they get to understand. And I've only had one person who said they didn't want to share that information. And, I just tell them, I really don't know if you're telling the truth or not. It's doing the activity, hopefully that you are, but that's not the point of the activity. All right, so that's one particular one, just an introductory one that's easy to use. Another one that I've done, this one I actually did as an assessment, and let me open it. And this one was on the Patriot Act. And my students in my modern U.S. history class, we've been talking about, government and politics and how government's established and, participating in politics and what it means to be, a citizen and things like that. So this particular one, they were asked to, this was their final exam. They could do this as a video. They actually had a choice of actually writing an essay and answering these same questions, or they could interview somebody and answer the questions, or they could do this VoiceThread. And so for the VoiceThread, I gave them some basic instructions that they were to review each slide. And how you move through the slides is using this right arrow over here on the side. And so they had to start by answering these questions, and they had to answer them using a video. So they had to video themselves reading and answering the questions. And all this is prompting them to then go into what do they know about the Patriot Act? What do they know about the constitutionality of the Patriot Act, the effectiveness of the Patriot Act? And these are things that we've been talking about during the course. So they would go through, they would record, click down here, they're going to record with the video and answer those questions. And then they're going to move to the next one. In this case, they were given an infogram. And this is an infogram. This one happens to come from the ACLU, and it's their explanation about the Patriot Act, its effectiveness, and its whether it's legal or not, excuse me. And then I just added the actual text from the infogram because the infogram is a little hard to read. But let me go back for a second. If they're on a page and it is hard to read, then they can do the zoom, and they can zoom in or they can zoom out, so they can actually read it even though it may be look small. And this is in the case where if I wanted to link to where I found this, I could actually add a link, which I already did, that is the information about the Patriot Act. And then once they, read that, like I said, this is just the written text of it. The next thing they had to do was read a decision by the Attorney General on why he believed the Patriot Act was necessary and its effectiveness. And then, so they would go through that, and that was a couple of pages. And again, remember, they can expand it or, put it out. And then the next thing, the very last thing they had to do was, after reviewing all of that evidence and all that discussion, excuse me, let me open this, they had to tell me whether they thought the Patriot Act was a necessary tool for national security or should it be repealed. And I tell them in this particular case, as in many cases, there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to offer a reasoned response based on evidence. And for this was their final exam, and normally they would do this in some kind of in-class essay, but in this case they just went through and they talked about it, and students got really into it, and they made great arguments. And I had students who made different arguments, and that's okay. They were able to support their arguments. And so in this case, this was a moderated VoiceThread where students couldn't see each other's posts because it was a final exam. And of course, under the final exam instructions in Canvas, they had, what they had to do as far as submitting it and things like that. So, all right, so those are some really quick ways of how to use VoiceThread. And there's also, let me go back one more time. I want to go back to, let me sign out of this, to the VoiceThread homepage. And I want to show you, if you go to Browse, pop it up, there's all these tutorials about VoiceThread. So under the Higher Ed tutorial, there's lots of tutorials by subject matter. And these are not tutorials, these are examples of VoiceThread that people have done. But then you can go, and here's many tutorials on how to use VoiceThread, creating a VoiceThread, commenting on a VoiceThread, moderating it if you're going to do an assessment. So there's lots of information here, and if you are interested in using VoiceThread and you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to work with anyone.